Welcome back to my kitchen, and if this is the first time you've been here, welcome. I'm Lauren with Delectable You, and today we are making butternut squash pumpkin soup. I've actually taken a recipe and modified it to make it vegan. If you don't care about vegan, that's okay. I'll give you the original ingredients as well. This is a really great soup to make for the fall and for the winter. It's hearty, it's healthy, it's easy to make. It makes a big pot. You can keep it in the fridge to warm up for lunches and dinners. You can have it as a starter if you have people over for dinner. It's just really fantastic. So the first thing we're going to do is deal with these onions because you're going to need 2 cups of onions. Chop them small dice, medium dice, doesn't really matter because they're going to get pureed later. But we're going to put these into our pot that's been simmering with olive oil. So come on over. Okay, so the oil has been heating. This is 2 tablespoons of olive oil. The original recipe was 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 tablespoon olive oil. So if you don't want to make this vegan, you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, 2 tablespoons olive oil. It's been heating up nicely. So now I'm just going to pour these onions in here. And I just want to mix them around so that they all get coated with olive oil. And what we're going to do is we're going to let these onions cook in the olive oil for about 10 minutes, just until they get nice and translucent. And in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and deal with our butternut squash. Okay, so I got this ginormous butternut squash from the grocery store, and it's actually 5 pounds, 7 ounces. Way too much. The recipe calls for 1.5 pounds. So I'm just going to cut it in half, and I'm only going to use half of it, and I'm going to save the rest for later. So before we do that, we need to peel it. Peeling a butternut squash can be a bit of a pain in the butt, but if you put some muscle into it, you can do it. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, we're good to go. So the next thing we need to do is we need to cut it up. And this can be difficult, but we don't have to make it difficult. We can make it easy. So first thing you're gonna do is cut off the top. And then cut off the bottom. This one is a little bit more difficult because of how big the squash is. Just don't get a big squash like I did. Wasn't so bad. Now, there are different ways of doing this, but I like to cut the butternut squash right down the center. Be very careful. Ta-da! So now we just need to take the seeds out and cut it up into cubes, and we'd be good to go. We've battled through the butternut squash and we now have our cubes, yay! If you want to buy pre-cut butternut squash, you can go ahead and do that, but this is more of a challenge. If you'd like the challenge, go ahead and buy a whole one. Let's go on over to the pot and visit our onions because we've got plans for them, trust me. All right, so our onions are nice and buttery and translucent, and this is exactly where I want them to be. So now we're gonna add our lovely vitamin C filled, vitamin A filled butternut squash to the pan, or pot, I should say. Then we're gonna add 1 full can of pumpkin puree, not pumpkin pie puree, pumpkin puree. It's 15 ounces. So let's add this to the pot. I'm just going to mix this around a little bit. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to add 3 to 4 cups of vegetable stock. If you don't care about this being vegan, you can add chicken stock. That's not a problem, but I do, so I'm going to add vegetable stock. And I say 3 to 4 cups because really what you want to do is just pour enough liquid in so that the butternut squash is covered and immersed fully in liquid, because now it's going to simmer for 30 minutes until it's tender. So let's see how much I need. All right, so that's pretty good. Probably want a little bit more liquid, but rather than opening up an entirely new container of vegetable stock that I'm probably not going to use for a while, I'm just going to fill the rest with water. And it's okay, because if I need to adjust the seasoning, then I can do that. And vegetable stock and chicken stock is water-based anyway. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. Okay, so just add a little bit more water until it's nice and immersed. All right, that's perfect. We're almost done. We just need to add about ½ teaspoon of pepper, and we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. You can measure, or you can do it the Lauren way, which is eyeballing it. I think that's a teaspoon. I think that's another one. Okay, now I'm just going to stir this all together. I'm going to turn the heat up so that it comes to a nice simmer, and I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to let the squash and the pumpkin simmer together, and in about 30 minutes the butternut squash is going to be so tender that I'm going to be able to puree it. So you've got 30 minutes. We'll see you in 30. All right, so you're just going to take a fork and you're going to test the butternut squash. It's nice and tender and it's ready to be pureed. Good for us, maybe not so much for the butternut squash. Okay, so I'm going to turn the heat off for a minute. This is a nice little trusty immersion blender. If you don't have one of these, it's okay. You can still puree the soup. You'll just have to ladle it into a blender or a Vitamix or something. But I do recommend you invest in one of these. They're like $30. You don't need to get a really expensive one because it will save you that step of having to transfer it into a blender and then transfer it back into the pan. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to immerse this in here, and I'm going to puree the soup. So I just want to take a little spoon or spatula and make sure that there are no more chunks of butternut squash to make sure I've really truly pureed everything. And it looks like I have, so that's great. So we just have one more step, and that step is to your discretion. So right now what I want to do is add a cup of rice milk. If you don't want to use rice milk, you can use almond milk. If you don't want to use that, you can use coconut milk, which will change the flavor a little bit, but it'll still be really good. And then if you don't really care about making it vegan, then you can go ahead and add cream or regular milk. So that's what we're going to do right now. So this just kind of thins the soup out a little bit, which is a good thing. Just going to stir that around. And I really like this consistency. It's not too thick and it's not too watery either. So I'm not going to add any more. If this was still really thick and you wanted it to be a little bit thinner, then you could just keep adding more milk or whatever you chose to use until you got the consistency that you want. Now, before I let you go, because I know you're dying to go and try this, we have to taste it and adjust it for the seasoning. Because remember, I added water instead of extra vegetable stock. So I just want to make sure that it still tastes really good. And it does. And if it didn't, what I would suggest is adding a bit more salt. Don't be afraid of salt. Salt brings out the dominant flavor in any dish. That's why salt is added to baked goods as well, because it enhances the flavor of whatever the dominant flavor is. So that's it. Now you've made your soup, you've got dinner or lunch for the week, or you've got your starter for your dinner party. And I will see you next time. Thank you for joining me. This has been Lauren with Delectable You, and I'll see you again soon.